Widowed businessman buys farm for peace, but who he finds there changes everything. David Mitchell was breathing heavily as he drove down the dirt road. 2 years had passed since Elizabeth left, and the pain still burned in his chest like it was the first day. The successful businessman had left New York City behind, determined to find peace on the farm he had just bought in rural Pennsylvania. When he finally stopped the car in front of the main house and opened the door, he expected to find only silence and furniture covered with sheets. Instead, he encountered a woman with brown hair and a blue dress who was caressing her obviously pregnant belly. She was organizing baby clothes on a makeshift dresser. "I'm sorry, but you must be at the wrong property," said the woman, showing no intention of moving. David looked around, confused. The house was exactly as described in the purchase documents. The wooden porch, the colonial windows, the view of the green pastures. Everything matched. "I'm David Mitchell. I bought this farm 3 weeks ago. I have all the papers." The woman turned completely to face him. Her brown eyes shone with determination. "My name is Sarah Carter, and I've lived here for 8 months. I'm not leaving." Her tone was firm, but David noticed an almost imperceptible tremor in her voice. The pregnancy was quite advanced, perhaps 8 months. "Look, ma'am, Sarah, I understand there might be some confusion, but I paid $250,000 for this property. I have the deed registered at the courthouse." Sarah walked to a nearby table and picked up a yellowed folder. "And I have these documents that prove my family has had rights to this land for over 30 years. She extended old papers. David reluctantly approached. The documents were employment contracts signed by a certain William Carter, dated 1995. William Carter was my adoptive father. He was the caretaker of this farm for decades. He took care of this land better than any owner. "That doesn't give you ownership rights," David replied, but his voice sounded less confident than he intended. Sarah rested her hands on her belly and sighed. "You don't understand. This farm belonged to the Harrison family. When Mr. Anthony Harrison lost everything gambling, he signed a document promising the property to my father as payment for years of service. I have a copy here. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing." David felt the ground shake beneath his feet. None of his lawyers had mentioned any pending issues with the property. He took the document Sarah offered. "This appears to be just an informal promise," he said, after examining the paper. "It may be informal to you, but it was the word of an honorable man. My father worked here until the day until he couldn't anymore." The hesitation in her voice piqued David's curiosity. "What happened to your father?" Sarah looked away toward the window. "He fell ill. Heart problems. He had to be hospitalized in the city and never returned. But before he went, he brought me here. He said this land was my future." "And where is he now?" "He passed away 6 months ago." The word "passed away" echoed in the silence. David understood the meaning without needing to ask. He looked at Sarah again, noticing how she instinctively protected her belly. "And the baby's father?" Sarah's face hardened. "That's none of your business." David walked to the porch, trying to organize his thoughts. The afternoon breeze carried the scent of grass and wet earth. It was exactly the tranquility he sought, but now everything seemed complicated. "Look, Sarah, I understand your situation, but I have rights too. I invested all my savings in this property. I need a place to start over. And I need a place to raise my child." The simplicity of the answer hit David like a punch. He turned to look at her again. Sarah was stroking her belly with gentle gestures, the blue dress outlining the curves of her pregnancy. "Why here? Surely there are other places where you could—" "You don't understand," she interrupted him. "This isn't just a house to me. It's the only home I've known since I was 5 years old. Every stone, every tree, every spring on this land is part of who I am." David observed the sincerity in her eyes. There was something in how she spoke about the farm that echoed his own feelings. "How do you survive here alone?" "I do veterinary work for the neighbors. I help with animal births, treat injuries, those kinds of things. My father taught me a lot about veterinary medicine. That explained the confidence with which she moved around the property. David had noticed the animals around the house looked healthy and well cared for. Did you study veterinary medicine? I started the course at Lancaster State University, but circumstances changed. Again, that hesitation suggesting untold stories. The sun began setting behind the mountains, painting the sky with orange hues. David realized he had driven for 6 hours and was exhausted. Look, it's getting late. Tomorrow I'll call my lawyer and sort this situation out. For today, can we share the house? Sarah studied him cautiously. You're not going to try to kick me out during the night? The question revealed a vulnerability she tried to hide. David shook his head. I'm not that kind of person. All right. You can stay in the back room. I've been sleeping in the main bedroom for months. David grabbed his suitcase from the car and followed Sarah through the house. The rooms were simple but tidy. There were flowers in makeshift vases and the smell of home cooking in the air. Have you had dinner? Asked Sarah, stopping in the kitchen. No, I ate something on the road this morning. I made vegetable soup. I can warm some up for you. The offer surprised him. After a day of tension, that kindness seemed out of place. Why are you being hospitable to me? Sarah served the soup into 2 bowls. My father always said the land teaches 2 important things, patience and compassion. Even if we're opponents in the legal matter, that doesn't mean we need to be cruel to each other. They ate in relative silence, with only the sound of cutlery and the nighttime noises of the countryside. David discreetly watched Sarah. There was a natural elegance in her movements, a serenity that contrasted with the tense situation between them. May I ask how old you are? He finally said. 28. And you? 35. Sarah nodded, as if that explained something. You're too young to be so sad. The observation caught him off guard. What makes you think I'm sad? Your eyes. And the fact you bought an isolated farm to find peace. Usually people only do that when they're running from something. David fell silent, stirring his soup in the bowl. Her insight bothered him. I lost my wife 2 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. I tried to carry on in New York City, but everything reminded me of her. The company, the apartment, the places we used to go. I needed a new place to breathe. Sarah lowered her eyes. I understand. When my father passed, I thought about leaving too. But I realized running from pain only made it chase me. Sometimes it's better to face the memories, to make peace with them. The wisdom in her voice surprised him. He hadn't expected life advice from a young pregnant woman who was trespassing on his property. And did it work? Facing the memories? I'm still trying. They finished dinner, and Sarah said goodbye, explaining she needed to sleep early because of the pregnancy. David was left alone in the kitchen, listening to the sounds of the rural night. Crickets, wind in the trees, the distant lowing of cattle. It was strange how that woman had managed to unsettle him in just a few hours. He had come to the farm seeking solitude, but found someone who seemed to understand his pain better than his friends in New York City. In the back room, David took a long time to fall asleep. The bed was simple, but comfortable. Through the open window, he could see the stars with a clarity impossible in the city. Elizabeth loved watching the stars. They used to sit on the apartment balcony, and she would invent stories about the constellations. In the morning, David woke to the sound of voices outside. He looked out the window and saw Sarah talking to a man about 60 years old, with graying hair and work clothes. Good morning, said David, stepping out of the house. Good morning, sir. I'm Samuel, a neighbor from the farm next door, the man replied, extending his hand. Sarah told me about your situation. What exactly did she tell you? That you bought the farm without knowing she lived here, and that you're trying to resolve the matter civilly. David looked at Sarah, who was organizing clothes on the clothesline. That's one way of looking at the situation. Look, Mr. David, I've known this girl since she was little. William raised her as his own daughter after her mother. Well, after her mother had to leave. She's a good person, works hard, helps everyone here in the area. I understand, but that doesn't change the fact that... I know, you have your rights too, Samuel interrupted him. I'm just saying that maybe there's a way for you both to resolve this without anyone losing out." After Samuel left, David found Sarah tending to an injured calf behind the house. What happened to him? He stepped on a wire and cut his hoof. "I've already cleaned it and applied medicine. He'll heal in a few days." David watched how she handled the animal with confidence and care. "Samuel said your mother left. What really happened?" Sarah stopped petting the calf and looked at him. "Why do you want to know?" "Curiosity. You know my whole story. It's only fair I know yours." Sarah sighed. "My mother worked as a housekeeper for a wealthy family in Philadelphia. When she got pregnant with me, she lost her job. She came here because she had nowhere else to go. My father took her in and raised me as if I were his own flesh and blood." "And her?" "She had emotional problems, deep depression. One day she just disappeared. I was 5 years old. We never heard from her again." The story explained a lot about Sarah's determination not to abandon the farm. "It must have been hard growing up without her. My father made up for it. He gave me love, knowledge, values. He taught me everything about this land." David felt a pang of guilt for wanting to take away from her the only home she had ever known. "Sarah, I need to call my lawyer today, but I want you to know I don't intend to be cruel to you." "Thank you. I will also seek legal help. Do you have money for a lawyer?" "I'll figure something out." The evasive answer worried him. He knew how expensive legal matters could be. In the afternoon, David spoke on the phone with Dr. Henry, his lawyer in New York City. "David, I need to check the purchase documents more carefully. It's possible there was some irregularity in the process." "How so?" "The seller, Edward Johnson, has a complicated history. He's been involved in other questionable transactions involving rural properties." "Are you saying I was cheated?" "It's too early to say for sure, but I will investigate. Meanwhile, I suggest you keep the situation stable there." After hanging up, David felt uneasy. If there were irregularities in the purchase, his entire plan for a fresh start could fall apart. "Problems?" asked Sarah, who had approached. "Maybe. My lawyer will investigate the purchase more thoroughly." "And if they find any irregularities?" "I don't know. Maybe I've lost $250,000. Sarah fell silent for a moment. "I'm sorry. I know you're also going through a difficult time." Her empathy touched him. Even being a legal opponent, Sarah showed genuine compassion. "Sarah, can I ask you something personal?" "You can try. Your baby's father. Did you break up because of the pregnancy?" Sarah's face contorted in pain. "He said I was just a fling, that he never had serious intentions with me." "Does he know about the baby?" "He knows. He wants nothing to do with the child." David felt anger toward a man he didn't know. "Do you have plans for when the baby is born?" "I'll raise it right here. Nature is the best place for a child to grow up." "What about the delivery? Where's the nearest hospital?" "In 3 Bridges, 40 minutes from here. But Mrs. Perpetua, the local midwife, has helped dozens of women give birth. If all goes well, I won't need to go to the city." The idea of Sarah giving birth on an isolated farm with only a midwife made David nervous, though he didn't know exactly why. In the following days, a strange routine settled between them. David handled administrative matters of the farm, while Sarah followed her routine of caring for animals. They shared meals in cordial silence, each respecting the other's space. David discovered that Sarah maintained a small, improvised veterinary clinic hours. Neighbors regularly appeared with injured or sick animals. She never charged for her services, accepting only donations of food or homemade products. "Why don't you charge for your work?" he asked one morning, after seeing her treat a dog's broken leg. "These people are my family. Family doesn't charge family." The simple answer revealed a life philosophy that contrasted with the competitive business world David came from. One afternoon, while organizing papers in the house's office, David found a wooden box hidden behind old books. Inside were letters yellowed with age. "Sarah, do you know what these letters are?" She approached and examined the envelopes. "They're letters my father kept. I never touched them, respecting his privacy." "Can I read them?" I guess it doesn't matter now. David opened the first letter, dated 1998. It was signed by a woman named Elizabeth Harrison. Dear William, I hope this letter finds you well. I'm sorry I couldn't visit you as promised. The circumstances here at home are getting more complicated. Daddy lost a lot of money in the timber business, and Mommy is desperate. I think a lot about our conversation about the farm. If things get worse, we might really need to consider your proposal. You've always been loyal to our family, and I know you'd take good care of the property. Kisses from the friend who never forgets your kindness. Elizabeth. David's heart almost stopped. Elizabeth was his late wife's name. What kind of coincidence could this be? Sarah, who was Elizabeth Harrison? The daughter of the farm's former owner. Why? Did you meet her personally? No. She left here when I was very young. My father spoke of her sometimes, said she was a very good woman. David opened other letters, all signed by the same Elizabeth. In one of them, dated 2000, she mentioned moving to New York City to study business administration. Sarah, do you have any photos of this Elizabeth? Maybe my father kept some. Why the interest? It's just, my late wife was also named Elizabeth, and she also studied business administration in New York City. Sarah looked at him strangely. Must be a coincidence. Maybe. Do you know her full name? Elizabeth Harrison Johnson, I think. Why? David felt the world spin. His Elizabeth was named Elizabeth Johnson. She had never mentioned Harrison as a middle name. Sarah, I need a favor. Can you look for pictures of her in your father's belongings? Intrigued, Sarah searched an old dresser in the master bedroom. She returned with a yellowed photo showing a young brunette with light eyes. David took the photo with trembling hands. It was Elizabeth. His Elizabeth. Sarah, this is my wife. What do you mean? The woman in this photo is Elizabeth Johnson, my late wife. Sarah sat down heavily in a chair. That's not possible. It is possible, and if it's true, it means Elizabeth knew this farm, knew your father, and never told me anything about it. David reread the letters with new understanding. Elizabeth had grown up on this farm, knew every corner he was just discovering. Why did she never tell me about this place? Maybe she had her reasons, said Sarah, still processing the revelation. Or maybe our purchase wasn't such a coincidence after all. Suspicion grew in David's mind. He remembered how excited Elizabeth had been when he mentioned his search for rural properties. She had even suggested he look specifically in Pennsylvania. Sarah, I need to make some calls. David stepped out onto the porch with his cell phone. First, he called Dr. Henry. Doctor, I need you to investigate who really sold me this farm. I want to know everything about Edward Johnson and how he obtained the property. I'm already on it, David. I've found some troubling inconsistencies. What kind of inconsistencies? The property has changed hands several times in recent years through transactions that seem legal on the surface, but follow a suspicious pattern. Explain further. Small companies buy the property for low amounts, make minimal improvements, and resell it for prices well above market value. It's as if someone is laundering money using rural properties. David felt a chill in his stomach. And my purchase. You were the last link in the chain. You paid $250,000 for a property that was bought for $80,000 just 6 months earlier. I was cheated. It seems so. But there's something even stranger. The name Elizabeth Johnson appears on some documents as a reference for the transaction. David nearly dropped the phone. What do you mean? There's an authorization signed by Elizabeth Johnson permitting the sale of the property, dated 2 months before your purchase. That's impossible. Elizabeth died 2 years ago. I know. That's why I'm saying there's something very wrong with all this. After hanging up, David stood on the porch trying to process the information. Elizabeth had authorized the sale of a property 2 years after her death, and this property was the place where she had grown up. Can I help? Sarah had approached quietly. My wife signed an authorization to sell this farm 2 months ago. That's impossible if she... Exactly. If she died 2 years ago. They fell silent, watching the sun set over the pastures. Mr. David, there's something I need to tell you about my father. What? He was very agitated in the last few weeks before he left. He received strange calls, people asking about the property. He even told me that we might have to leave here. Why? He never really explained. But he mentioned that powerful people were interested in the farm and that our staying here might no longer be safe. Sarah's revelation added another layer of complexity to the mystery. Sarah, do you have any idea what could be so special about this land to attract so much interest? My father always said this region had special waters, very pure springs that never dried up, even in drought years. Water? Yes. And also a part of the farm that he never let me explore. He said it was dangerous. Where? Sarah pointed to an area of dense woods at the back of the property. There, whenever I tried to go in that direction, he would get nervous. David decided that the next day he would explore that area. Something told him that the answers to his questions were hidden among those trees. That night David had trouble sleeping. He dreamed of Elizabeth walking through the farm as a child, running through the same fields he was discovering. He woke up several times, restless. Around midnight he heard noises coming from Sarah's room, low moans as if she was in pain. "Sarah, are you all right?" "I think the baby wants to be born," she replied, her voice tense. David got up quickly. He knew nothing about childbirth, but he knew that 8 months was premature. "I need to take you to the hospital." "No, not yet. They might be false contractions. Mrs. Perpetua said that's normal." "Where is her phone?" Sarah handed him a piece of paper with the number. David called and explained the situation to the midwife. "I'll come over to examine the girl," said Mrs. Perpetua, "but it might take me an hour to get there. If the contractions get too strong or her water breaks, take her straight to the hospital." David stayed by Sarah's side, feeling completely useless. She breathed in a controlled way, one hand on her belly and the other gripping the sheet. "Have you been through this before?" she asked between contractions. "No. Elizabeth and we tried to have children, but she started getting sick before we could." Sarah looked at him with compassion, even in the midst of her own pain. "That must have been very hard for you." Elizabeth really wanted to be a mother. It was one of her biggest dreams. "And you?" "I wanted what made her happy." A stronger contraction made Sarah moan and double over. David instinctively held her hand. "Take a deep breath. It will pass." "How do you know?" "I saw it in movies." She laughed through the pain, which surprised him. "You're funny when you're nervous." "I'm not nervous." "Your hands are shaking." David looked at his own hands and realized she was right. Mrs. Perpetua arrived an hour later, a lady with graying hair and confident movements. She examined Sarah and declared they were practice contractions. "The baby isn't ready to be born yet, but you need complete rest for the next few days." "What does complete rest mean?" asked David. "No lifting heavy objects, no working with the animals, no stress?" Sarah sighed. "But the animals need care." "I can help with that," David said before thinking. "You don't understand anything about veterinary medicine. I can learn, you teach me." The offer surprised everyone, including himself. "Why would you do that?" asked Sarah. David didn't have a ready answer. There was something in her vulnerability that awakened his protective instincts. "Because it's the right thing to do." In the following days, David found himself learning the basics of rural veterinary medicine. Sarah instructed him from the sofa where she was confined, teaching him to identify symptoms, apply medication, and treat basic injuries. "No, not like that. The animal will get scared. Approach slowly, let it smell your hand first," Sarah instructed, as David tried to examine a cow with mastitis. Though clumsy at first, David discovered he had some natural talent with animals. His calm presence soothed them. "You have good hands," Sarah commented, after he managed to suture a deep cut on a dog's paw. "Elizabeth always said that too. She joked that I was born to be a surgeon instead of a businessman." "Why didn't you ever try medicine?" "Family pressure. My father had a business and expected me to take over. Medicine seemed too financially risky." "And do you regret it?" David considered the question while washing his hands. "Sometimes. Especially after Elizabeth fell ill. I kept wondering if I could have done something different if I knew more about medicine. You couldn't have saved her, even if you were a doctor." The certainty in Sarah's voice surprised him. "How can you be so sure?" "Because love doesn't work that way. If it did, we wouldn't lose the people we love." The simplicity of Sarah's philosophy touched him deeply. One afternoon, while Sarah was resting, David decided to explore the farm area she had mentioned. He walked through the dense woods, following an almost invisible trail. After 20 minutes, he reached a clearing where there were ruins of an old building, stone walls covered with ivy, and an opening that seemed to lead to a basement. David carefully descended the stone steps. Below, he found what appeared to have been a storage room. In the walls, niches carved into the rock held ancient ceramic jars. One of the jars contained documents wrapped in waxed cloth. David brought them to the light and discovered they were contracts and deeds dated from the 19th century. Among the papers, he found a family tree of the Harrison family. Elizabeth appeared on the list as the great-granddaughter of the farm's original founder. But what intrigued him most was finding the name Sarah Carter in a margin note, with an arrow pointing to Elizabeth and the words, "Separated Sisters." David rushed up from the cellar and returned to the house. "Sarah, you need to see this." He showed her the documents and the family tree. "I don't understand. How can my name be on these old papers?" "Because you're not just Sarah Carter. You're Sarah Harrison Carter." Sarah turned pale. "That's impossible. Look here. Your mother was named Carmen Harrison. She was Elizabeth's sister. My mother was named Carmen Carter." "No. She adopted the Carter surname when she came here, but her birth name was Carmen Harrison." Sarah picked up the papers with trembling hands. "Are you saying Elizabeth was my aunt? More than that, you're half-sisters, daughters of the same father but different mothers." The revelation was devastating for both. David realized he had fallen in love with his late wife's half-sister. Sarah realized the man who had invaded her property was actually her brother-in-law. "I need air," said Sarah, clumsily getting up from the sofa. "Mrs. Perpetua told you not to get up." "I don't care." She went out to the porch, breathing heavily. David followed her. "Sarah, I know this is shocking, but—" "Shocking?" She turned to face him. "Elizabeth was my sister and never looked for me? She knew I existed and left me abandoned here?" "Maybe she didn't know where you were." "She knew where the farm was. She could have come back any time." David didn't know how to comfort her. He himself was processing the discovery that Elizabeth had hidden an entire family from him. "Why did she never tell me about you?" Sarah leaned on the porch railing. "Maybe because she was ashamed of us. The rich man's daughter who got the maid pregnant. Probably not a story she wanted to tell her businessman husband. Elizabeth wasn't like that. She was the most generous person I knew." "Then why did she abandon me here?" The question hung in the air unanswered. That evening they both ate dinner in silence. The weight of the revelations had completely changed the dynamic between them. "David," Sarah said finally. It was the first time she had called him by his first name. "Yes?" "I think I understand why Elizabeth never looked for me." "Why?" "Guilt. If she were to look for me, she'd have to explain why she abandoned us in the first place." "You were children when she left here." "Exactly. And children don't decide to leave. Someone decided for her." David hadn't considered that possibility. "Do you think they forced her to leave?" "My father was always very evasive about what happened to the Harrison family. She only said that circumstances forced Elizabeth to leave." "What kind of circumstances?" "I don't know, but perhaps the documents you found have more answers." The next morning, David returned to the ruins with Sarah, who insisted on accompanying him despite the rest orders. "I won't stay home while we're discovering the truth about my family." They explored the underground cellar more carefully. Sarah, knowing the farm's secrets better, found a wall that seemed false. "There's something behind here," she said, tapping on the stone. David managed to move one of the stones, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a rusty metal box. The box contained more recent letters, some dated just 3 years earlier. They were all signed by Elizabeth. "Dear William, I heard from friends that you're ill, and I really need to talk to you about Sarah. I know I made a terrible mistake by leaving without explanations, but at the time I had no choice. Now that I'm an adult and have my own resources, I want to make peace with the past. Sarah has the right to know the truth about our family and why our mother and I had to leave. Please reply to this letter. I need to know if I can visit you. With affection and remorse, Elizabeth. The next letter was even more revealing. William, I received your reply and understand your anger. You have every right to hate me for what our family did to you. But please don't punish Sarah for our parents' sins. I've discovered that dangerous men are still interested in the farm. They know about the quartz deposits and mineral waters on the property. If we can't protect Sarah, she might be in danger. I'm planning a way to legally buy the farm to put it in her name. I know you would never accept money from me directly, so I'll do it through third parties. I'll take care of Sarah even if she never knows she was protected by me. Elizabeth, she was trying to protect you, said David, his voice choked. By buying the farm through third parties? Sarah completed the thought. You were one of those third parties. The realization hit them both simultaneously. Elizabeth had orchestrated the purchase of the farm by David as a way to indirectly protect Sarah. She used me, said David, feeling a mix of anger and admiration for his deceased wife. No, she took care of both of us, of you, by giving you a reason to restart your life, and of me, by placing someone trustworthy to protect me. How can I be trustworthy if I didn't even know you existed? Sarah looked at him with a sad smile. Elizabeth knew you better than you know yourself. She knew that, even without knowing our family connection, you would do the right thing when you found me here. David reread the letters, trying to understand the complexity of Elizabeth's plan. But why didn't she come in person? Why didn't she tell me the truth? Sarah found one last letter at the bottom of the box. My dear husband, if you're reading this, it means I didn't have time to execute my plans while I was alive. The cancer progressed faster than we expected. David, there's a part of my life I never shared with you because it involved too much pain to tell. But now I need you to know about the existence of Sarah, my half-sister, who lives on the farm where I grew up. Sarah is the only family I have left in the world, but circumstances from the past separated us when we were children. I tried to reconnect with us, but she rejected me because of the abandonment. If anything happens to me, please take care of her, not as charity but as family. She is good, smart, and deserves a chance to be happy. The farm belongs to her by birthright. The documents I left with Dr. Henry explain how to transfer the property legally. I know you may be confused and hurt that I hid this from you, but I trust your natural kindness will lead you to do the right thing. With all my love and trust, Elizabeth. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of wind in the trees. David folded the letter carefully. She planned everything, he finally said. Even her own death, agreed Sarah, tears in her eyes. Did you know about her letters to your father? No, Daddy never told me. But now I understand why he became so agitated at the end. Elizabeth was trying to reconnect, and that left him torn between past anger and his love for me. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now continuing, David stood up and walked to the cellar entrance. Sarah, I need to ask you a direct question. Go ahead. Would you have rejected me if you'd known from the beginning who I was? Sarah considered the question carefully. Probably. I was still too hurt by Elizabeth. And now? Now I understand that we were all victims of circumstances. You, me, and especially Elizabeth. They climbed up from the cellar in silence. The sun was setting, tinting the sky orange and pink. What do we do now? Asked Sarah. We fulfill Elizabeth's last wish. The farm is rightfully yours. And you? David looked at the fields he had come to love. I'll return to New York City. Why? The question caught him off guard. Why, indeed? Because staying would be too complicated? Because falling for your sister-in-law felt wrong? Because the whole situation was too confusing to process? Because you no longer need protection. Now that we know the truth, you can live your life in peace. Sarah rested her hand on her stomach. What if I don't want you to go? David's heart quickened. Why? Because I've grown fond of your company, because you helped me when I needed it, because my child will grow up without a father, and it would be good to have a male figure around. Sarah. And because Elizabeth wanted us to take care of each other. David turned to face her. Her blue dress billowed in the evening breeze, and there was a determination in her eyes that reminded him of Elizabeth. It would be too complicated. Why? Because I've fallen in love with you. The confession came out before he could stop it. Sarah stood still for a moment. Since when? Since that first night, when you offered me soup, even though we were adversaries. That's crazy. I know. Elizabeth is still between us. I know that too. Sarah stepped closer to him. But she wanted our happiness. The letters make that clear. Even if that's true, people will talk. A man marrying his sister-in-law just a few years after becoming a widower. Does that matter? David realized it didn't. For the first time since Elizabeth's death, he felt alive again. Sarah, there's an age difference between us. I have life experience you don't. I've been married, I've experienced losses, and I'll be a single mother at 28. We're not children anymore, David. The sound of his name in her voice made him tremble. If we stay together, will it be for the right reasons or just because Elizabeth wanted it? Sarah cupped his face in her hands. I'll be honest with you. It started as gratitude, then it turned into admiration. Now it's love. Are you sure? You slept poorly for 3 nights straight when I thought the baby might come early. You learned veterinary skills to help me. You uncovered secrets about your own wife and still stood by me. If that's not love, it's something very close. David gently kissed her forehead. What if it doesn't work between us? What if it does? It was a good question. David imagined waking up every morning in that place, building a life with Sarah, raising the baby as his own. It would have to be slow, he finally said. Slow how? First, we'd settle all the legal matters of the farm. Then I'd return to New York City for a few weeks to get my life in order there. When I came back, we could try building something together. And the baby? The baby would be my child too, if you wanted. Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen since meeting her. Elizabeth chose well when she chose you. They spent the night talking about plans for the future. David described how he could sell his company in New York City and invest in the farm. Sarah spoke about her dream of turning the property into a treatment center for injured animals. We could create a sanctuary, she said, her eyes shining, a place where abandoned or hurt animals could recover. It would require permits, proper facilities, specialized staff. Do you understand those bureaucratic matters? It's my specialty. Then we'd make a good team. Probably so. 2 weeks later, Dr. Henry arrived at the farm with a folder full of documents. The investigations confirmed everything, he said. The purchase was part of an elaborate scheme to protect Sarah. Elizabeth left very specific instructions on how to transfer the property. What about the money David paid? Asked Sarah. It will be fully refunded by a trust fund Elizabeth established before she died. In fact, she left enough resources to more than cover the costs. So she really planned every detail, murmured David. She also left a specific letter for both of you, which was only to be delivered if you decided to stay together. Dr. Henry handed over a sealed envelope. Dear David and Sarah, if you're reading this together, it means you've found a way to overcome the difficult circumstances that brought you together. I cannot express the relief I feel knowing you won't be alone. David, you've always had a generous heart, but never allowed yourself to show it fully. Sarah needs someone who values her strength and kindness. I believe you can heal each other's wounds. Sarah, I know you might be confused about accepting love from someone who was my husband, but I want you to know that my greatest happiness would be seeing you build a family together. Love doesn't diminish when shared. It multiplies. The farm is the place where I grew up, where I learned about life, where I discovered that the land teaches patience and hope. Take care of it and it will take care of you. To the baby on the way, you'll be lucky to grow up surrounded by so much love. Your chosen parents are extraordinary people who will do everything to ensure your happiness. Live well, love deeply, and be happy. Elizabeth. When they finished reading, all three had tears in their eyes. "She really thought of everything," said Dr. Henry. That evening, David prepared a special dinner to celebrate the end of the legal uncertainties. Sarah watched him cook, one hand on her growing belly. "You cook well for a businessman," she commented. "Elizabeth taught me. She said a man who can't manage in the kitchen will never be truly independent." One more thing we have to thank her for. "Sarah, may I ask a question about the baby?" "Go ahead." "Have you chosen a name yet?" "I was thinking Elizabeth, if it's a girl." The suggestion touched David deeply. "And if it's a boy?" "William, like my father. Matthew Elizabeth Mitchell Carter." I like the sound of that. During dinner, they made more concrete plans for the future. "I'll need 2 months in New York City to sell the company and organize the move," said David. "What if you change your mind while you're there?" "I won't. How can you be so sure?" David looked around the simple kitchen, at the pregnant woman before him, at the view of the fields through the window. "Because for the first time in 2 years, I wake up without feeling pain. Because when I think about the future, I see hope instead of emptiness." "And you don't feel like you're betraying Elizabeth's memory?" "At first, I did. But now I understand that she orchestrated all of this because she wanted us to be happy. Betraying her would mean wasting the opportunity she gave us." Sarah reached her hand across the table, and David held it. "When you get back from New York City, will we get married? If you want." "I do, but I want it to be special, not just a formality to settle legal matters." "What would make it special for you?" "A simple ceremony, here at the farm. Samuel could be our best man. Mrs. Perpetua could be my matron of honor. And we'd have a party for all the neighbors who've become our family. And Elizabeth, she would be part of the celebration, not as a shadow from the past, but as the person who made all of this possible." The next morning, David began preparing for his trip to New York City. Sarah helped him organize his papers, moving carefully because of her advanced pregnancy. "Don't forget to check in every day," she said. "I'll call every night. And if any complications come up in the city, any temptations to stay." David stopped packing and looked at her. "Sarah, are you unsure about something?" "A little. I'm still processing all of this. Sometimes I'm afraid I'm living a dream that will end when you leave." "It's not a dream, it's real." "How can I be sure?" David pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "Because I'd like you to wear this while I'm away." Inside the box was a simple white gold ring with a small diamond. "It was Elizabeth's," he explained. "But she left instructions for me to give it to you when the time was right." Sarah was speechless. "She even knew about this?" "Apparently so. There was a letter from the jeweler among Dr. Henry's papers. Elizabeth had the ring resized 2 sizes larger because she looked into it and found out your hands are bigger than hers. That's both amazing and unsettling at the same time. Will you accept it?" Sarah extended her left hand, and David slid the ring onto her ring finger. It fit perfectly. "It's beautiful, and it carries a story. Our story is just beginning." They kissed for the first time there in the kitchen, with the morning sun streaming through the windows and the sound of birds outside. 2 months, David said against her lips. 2 months, Sarah agreed. David left for New York City that same afternoon. During the trip, he called Sarah 3 times just to hear her voice. In the city, he immersed himself in the complex task of dismantling a business life built over 10 years. Selling the company turned out to be more complicated than he had imagined. "David, are you sure about this?" asked Charles, his partner. "The company is at its peak. Why abandon everything now?" "Because I've discovered there's something more important than financial success." "Is the farm really that profitable?" "It's not about money, Charles. It's about happiness." The negotiations dragged on for weeks. Meanwhile, David called Sarah religiously every night. "How's the baby?" he always asked. "Kicking a lot. I think he's going to be a soccer player." "And you?" "Missing you. The farm feels too big without you here." "We'll be together again soon." Samuel asked when you're coming back. He said the animals miss you. And you, do you miss me? Every day, every minute. In the 4th week, Sarah called earlier than usual, her voice tense. David, I think the baby is really coming now. Now. There are still 3 weeks left to complete the 9 months. I know, but the contractions are different this time. More regular, stronger. Have you called Mrs. Perpetua yet? She's on her way. But if things get complicated, I'll have to go to the hospital. Sarah, if there's any complication, don't wait. Go straight to the hospital. Okay, but David. Yes? I love you. I wanted you to know, in case... Don't talk like that. You'll be fine. The baby will be fine. And when I get back, we'll get married and be the happiest family in the world. Promise? I promise. After hanging up, David remained restless for the rest of the night. He tried to work but couldn't concentrate. At 3 in the morning, he gave up and decided to drive back to the farm. He arrived at 8 in the morning and found Samuel on the porch. How is she? He asked, before even getting out of the car. Mrs. Perpetua has been with her for 6 hours. She says the baby is stubborn and doesn't want to come out. David rushed into the house. In the bedroom, he found Sarah lying in bed, sweaty and exhausted, with Mrs. Perpetua by her side. You arrived just in time, said the midwife. This baby was waiting for her father. I'm not the father. For all intents and purposes, you are, said Sarah, reaching out her hand to him. David held her hand and felt the strength of a contraction surge through her. Does it hurt a lot? Now that you're here, it seems to hurt less. 2 hours later, the cries of a baby echoed through the house. Mrs. Perpetua lifted a small, pink, screaming baby girl. A perfect Elizabeth, she announced with a smile. David cut the umbilical cord with trembling hands. When they placed the baby in Sarah's arms, he felt overwhelming emotion. She's beautiful, he whispered. Do you want to hold her? David hesitated. He didn't know how to hold such a small baby. I won't hurt her? You have healer's hands, said Sarah. Remember? When Elizabeth was in his arms, David felt that his life had completely changed. The little one opened her dark eyes and seemed to look directly at him. I think she likes you, Sarah commented. How can you tell? She stopped crying. In the following days, David established a routine of caring for the baby that surprised everyone. He got up in the early hours for feedings, changed diapers, gave baths, sang off-key lullabies. You're a natural father, said Sarah, watching him rock Elizabeth to sleep. Elizabeth taught me that taking care of those we love is the most important thing in the world. Baby Elizabeth or your wife Elizabeth? Both. One afternoon, while Sarah rested and the baby slept, David went to the makeshift grave where William Carter was buried at the back of the farm. William, I know we never met, but I wanted to thank you for raising Sarah with so much love. She's an extraordinary woman, and that's thanks to you. I promise I'll take good care of her and your granddaughter, and I promise that Elizabeth will never be forgotten in this house. The wind rustled the trees like a response. When Sarah recovered from childbirth, they began preparations for the wedding. It would be a simple but meaningful celebration. I want to wear a dress that Elizabeth would have chosen, said Sarah. What do you mean? I want our union to be blessed by her in some way. David remembered a box he had found among Elizabeth's belongings in New York City. When he opened it, he found a simple wedding dress she had never worn. She bought this when we started dating, he explained. She said it was for a future special occasion. Sarah held the dress against her body. It fits perfectly. Another one of her plans we didn't understand at the time. The ceremony took place on a sunny November afternoon. Samuel walked Sarah to the makeshift altar on the porch, while Mrs. Perpetua held little Elizabeth in her arms. The justice of the peace from Three Bridges performed the ceremony. When it was time for the vows, David and Sarah had prepared special words. Sarah, said David, you taught me that love can arise from the most unlikely situations. You taught me that taking care of someone is the purest form of love. I promise to be your partner, your friend, the father of your daughter, and the man who will wake up every day grateful to have you in my life. David, replied Sarah. "You came into my life when I needed protection the most, but you gave me so much more than that. You gave me companionship, respect, love, and a family. I promise to share with you not only the happy days, but also the difficulties that will come." When they kissed as husband and wife, all the neighbors applauded. The baby Elizabeth cried out as if protesting not being included in the kiss. The party lasted until dawn. Samuel played the guitar, Mrs. Perpetua taught old dances to the younger ones, and neighborhood children ran through the fields lit by makeshift lights. "Elizabeth would be happy to see this," David said to Sarah as they danced. "She is watching, I'm sure." "How can you be so certain?" "Because I feel her presence in this place, not as a ghost, but as a good force that blesses our family." 2 years later, the farm had completely transformed. David and Sarah built a veterinary treatment center that served the entire region. The main house was expanded to accommodate the new activities. Elizabeth grew up healthy and curious, always surrounded by animals. By age 2, she already showed a natural talent for caring for injured little creatures. "She inherited her mother's gift," David would say, watching his daughter feed an orphaned lamb. "And her father's patience," Sarah would reply. One afternoon, while organizing papers in the office, Sarah found one last letter from Elizabeth that had gone unnoticed. "To my grandchild who is yet to come, if you're reading this, it means you grew up on the farm surrounded by the love of 2 extraordinary parents. I know you never met me in person, but I want you to know that I've been part of every moment of your life through the love I planted in your parents' hearts. This farm is your inheritance, but not just as property. It's your inheritance of values, of connection to the land, of understanding what truly matters in life. Your parents chose to stay together, not just for romantic love, but for love of the family you formed. That is rare and precious. Grow up knowing you were wanted, protected, and loved even before your birth. And when you're grown, pass this love forward. With all the affection from the grandma who watches your first steps from heaven, Elizabeth." She really thought of everything, Sarah murmured with tears in her eyes. "Even our future that we didn't yet know we would have." That night, after putting Elizabeth to sleep, David and Sarah sat on the porch to watch the stars. "Do you regret anything?" Sarah asked. "Taking so long to get here. And I regret resisting so much when you arrived." Everything happened at the right time. Elizabeth knew that. "Do you think she even planned the difficult moments we went through?" "I think she planned to give us the tools to overcome any difficulty together." Sarah rested her head on David's shoulder. "Sometimes I'm afraid all this is too good to be true." "I am too. But I've learned that happiness doesn't need to be earned through suffering. Sometimes life just gives us a second chance. A second chance for both of us. And for Elizabeth too. Through our daughter, she continues to live on this farm." 3 years after the wedding, Sarah became pregnant again. This time, a boy they named William, as planned. During the pregnancy, Elizabeth helped care for her mother with adorable seriousness. "Mommy needs to rest," she would say, covering Sarah with a blanket, "and you need to be a very special big sister," David would reply, kissing his daughter's forehead. William was born at home like Elizabeth, but this time the birth was calmer. Mrs. Perpetua, now nearly 70 years old, still insisted on delivering all the babies in the region. "This boy will be strong like his grandfathers," she said, examining the newborn. "Which grandfathers?" asked David. "All of them. William Carter, who taught about love for the land. Elizabeth's father, who taught about determination. And you, who are teaching about compassion." With 2 young children, the farm's routine became even more intense. David discovered that managing a rural veterinary center was much more challenging than running a company in the city. "No one taught me that cows have medical emergencies at 3 in the morning, he commented, after a difficult night treating a bovine with birthing complications. "Welcome to real rural life," laughed Sarah. Despite the difficulties, both knew they had found their place in the world. The farm prospered, the children grew up healthy, and the local community respected them as family. "Sometimes I forget what my life was like before I met you," said David one night, while rocking Matthew in his arms. "Was it a good life?" asked Sarah, combing Elizabeth's hair before bed. "It was a life, but it wasn't living." What's the difference? Living is having something worth waking up for every day. It's having people who depend on you and whom you want to protect. It's building something that will last beyond your own existence. Sarah stopped combing her daughter's hair and looked at him. You're speaking like a wise man. I'm speaking like a man who found his family. Elizabeth, now 5 years old, lifted her head from the pillow. Daddy, tell the story of Grandma Elizabeth again. Which part do you want to hear? The part where she arranged everything for me to be born into a happy family? David smiled. It was his daughter's favorite story. Once upon a time, there was a very wise woman who loved her family so much that she planned their happiness even after she was gone. She knew that one day a sad man would arrive at the farm looking for peace, and he would find a strong woman who needed protection, continued Elizabeth. And they would discover they were real family, added Sarah. And they would have beautiful children who would grow up on the farm, finished Elizabeth proudly. And they lived happily ever after, asked Matthew, even though he was too young to understand the story. They are living happily ever after, corrected David. 10 years after David and Sarah first met, the farm had become a regional reference in veterinary medicine and environmental conservation. They developed educational programs for local children and created a small sanctuary for injured wildlife. Elizabeth, now 12, already helped with veterinary treatments with impressive skill. Matthew, at 7, showed a talent for dealing with people and always welcomed visitors to the farm. Do you think our children will want to stay here when they grow up? Sarah asked one afternoon, while watching the children play in the pasture. I don't know, but they will always have this place as a home to return to. And if they want to study in the city, go to college away, we'll support them. The farm teaches that true love doesn't bind, it frees. Sarah held his hand, Sometimes I still can't believe how our lives have changed. I believe it, because it was built with love, patience, and a lot of determination, and with the help of someone very special who guided us here. They looked at the portrait of Elizabeth that occupied a place of honor in the living room. It wasn't a melancholic memorial, but a celebration of the life and love she had planted. That evening, as the sun set over the farm's green fields, David and Sarah knew they had fulfilled all the dreams that Elizabeth had nurtured for them. Little Elizabeth was playing with a puppy they had rescued. Matthew was building sandcastles near the creek. And in the hearts of David and Sarah, there was a deep peace that only comes when we find our true place in the world. Do you think Elizabeth knows how grateful we are to her? Asked Sarah. I'm sure she does. The love she planted keeps growing every day through us. And it will keep growing through our children and our children's children. That's how true family works. It passes love forward, like a torch that never goes out. When evening came, the whole family gathered on the porch to watch the stars as they did every night. It was a sacred moment where they felt Elizabeth's loving presence wrapping around all of them. Elizabeth held Matthew in her lap, while David pointed out constellations to them. Sarah brought hot tea for everyone. This is the life I always dreamed of, said Sarah, sitting next to David. It's perfect. It's not perfect, she corrected. It's real, and that's much better than perfection. David agreed. They had faced challenges, overcome misunderstandings, processed losses, and built something solid together. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was a story of true love between real people who chose to stay together through all the seasons of life. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. 15 years after the day David found Sarah at the farm, they were celebrating Elizabeth's 18th birthday. The young woman had decided to study veterinary medicine at Lancaster State University, following in her mother's footsteps. I'm afraid to leave and have you miss me, she confessed during the birthday dinner. We will miss you, said Sarah, but we'll also be proud watching you grow and follow your dreams. The farm will always be here for you, added David, and we will too. And I'll take care of everything while she's away, said Matthew, now a responsible 13-year-old teenager. You three are my foundation, said Elizabeth. Without you, I wouldn't have the courage to fly. Your Grandma Elizabeth would say the same thing, commented Sarah. True love gives us roots to sustain us and wings to fly. That night after the party, David and Sarah walked to the spot where they had buried a time capsule on their first wedding anniversary. "Remember what we wrote?" asked Sarah. "That we hoped our children would grow up happy and that our family would stay united." "We made it. We're not done yet. Elizabeth is going to college, Matthew still has 5 years of adolescence ahead, and we still have much love to give. And many stories to live. And many people to help." They looked at the lit house where the children were excitedly talking about Elizabeth's college plans. "Sarah, can I confess something?" "Always." "Sometimes I still dream about the first Elizabeth. Not sad dreams, but dreams where she visits us and tells us she's proud of how we've raised our family. I dream about her sometimes too, and about my father. In the dreams they're together, watching over us from where they are. Do you really believe that? I believe in love, and love doesn't end with death. It transforms and keeps protecting us through the people who remain." David hugged Sarah under the starry sky. 20 years ago, if someone had told me I'd be a farmer, father of 2, and married to a rural veterinarian, I'd have laughed in their face. And if someone had told me that a city businessman would arrive here and completely change my life, I'd have doubted it too. But Elizabeth knew. Somehow she knew we were each other's family, and she gave us all the necessary tools to discover that for ourselves. 25 years after their first meeting, David and Sarah were celebrating their silver anniversary. Elizabeth had graduated as a veterinarian and returned to work on the farm, bringing with her innovations from the university. Matthew was studying agricultural business and dreamed of expanding the family's enterprises. "I never imagined the farm would become all this," said Sarah, observing the modern facilities they had built. "And I never thought I'd feel so fulfilled working with the land," David replied. The silver anniversary party brought together hundreds of people who had been touched by the family's work over the years. Rescued animals, families helped, young people who learned trades at the training center they created. "You've built a legacy," said Samuel, now 80 years old but still sharp and active. "We built a family," corrected Sarah. "The legacy is a consequence." During the party, their daughter Elizabeth gave a moving speech. "My parents taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's a choice. They chose to love each other, to love us, and to love this land every day for the past 25 years. They chose to build something bigger than themselves, and they taught us to make the same choices." When the party ended and the last guests had left, David and Sarah were alone on the porch, just like the first night they spent together. "Any regrets?" asked Sarah, repeating the question she asked periodically. "None. And you? Only that I didn't trust Elizabeth's plan for us sooner. Maybe the initial distrust was necessary. If it had been too easy, perhaps we wouldn't value it as much. Maybe. What matters is that we got here together, and that we'll stay together for as long as God allows us." Sarah rested her head on David's shoulder. "Sometimes I wonder what Elizabeth would say if she could see us now. I think she'd say we did more than she expected, or that we did exactly what she planned from the start." They laughed together, a sound filled with complicity and mature love. "David." "Yes?" "Thank you for showing up in my life that day. Thank you for not kicking me out of here. Thank you for staying. Thank you for letting me stay." In that moment, as in so many others over the years, they felt Elizabeth's loving presence enveloping them like a silent blessing. The farm slept peacefully under the stars. The animals rested in their safe shelters. The children dreamed of their bright futures. And David and Sarah knew they had fulfilled the promise they made to each other and to Elizabeth's memory. They had built a life full of love, purpose, and genuine happiness. Years continued to pass. Elizabeth married a veterinarian she met at the university and brought her husband to work on the farm. Matthew graduated and opened a branch of the business in a neighboring town. Grandchildren arrived, filling the house with laughter and youthful energy. David, now with graying hair, still rose before dawn to tend to the animals. Sarah, with expression lines that told stories of many smiles, remained the soul of the place. "Do you think we did everything right?" Sarah asked on a quiet afternoon as they watched the grandchildren playing in the same field where Elizabeth had taken her first steps. "We did the best we could with what we had," David replied, "and what we had was abundant love. And Elizabeth's wisdom guiding us, and the determination to never give up on each other. Even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard." Sarah smiled, watching David play with the youngest grandchild. At 70, he still had the same kindness in his eyes that had won her over decades before. "You know what I'm most proud of in our story?" she said. "What?" "That we managed to honor Elizabeth's love without letting it stop us from creating our own love. It was the biggest challenge at first, but it was also our greatest victory." When the sun set that day, 4 generations of the family gathered for dinner. Elizabeth with her 3 children, William with his 2 daughters, and David and Sarah at the center of it all, watching gratefully at the family they had built. "Grandpa, tell the story of how you met Grandma," asked the eldest granddaughter, 10 years old. It was a tradition. The story was told at least once a month, and every child knew it by heart. "Once upon a time, a very sad man bought a farm to be alone," began David. "But he met a very angry woman who didn't want to leave," the children continued in chorus. "And they discovered they were family," added Sarah, "and that a very special person had planned it all so they could be happy," concluded Elizabeth. "And then came the babies," shouted the younger grandchildren. "And then came the babies," confirmed William, laughing. After dinner, when the children went to sleep and the children returned to their homes, David and Sarah were alone in the kitchen washing the dishes. It was another old ritual, a moment of connection at the end of each day. "Sarah." "Yes?" "If we could go back to the beginning, would you change anything?" Sarah dried her hands on the dish towel and turned to face him. "Would you have asked the same question 20 years ago?" "Probably." "And you still don't know the answer?" David smiled. "I do. I just like to hear you say it. I wouldn't change a thing. Not the difficulties, not the doubts, not the fears, because all of that brought us here. And is here perfect? Here is our home. And home doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be true." That night, lying in the same bed they had shared for decades, David and Sarah talked about their plans for the following week: vet appointments, grandchildren's visits, fixing the barn roof, simple plans of people who had found happiness in the simple things in life. "David?" "Yes?" "Thank you for teaching me that it's possible to start over without abandoning the past. Thank you for teaching me that family is much more than blood. And thank you to Elizabeth for orchestrating our meeting and for giving us permission to be happy together." They fell asleep holding hands, as they had for 30 years. Outside, the farm breathed peacefully under the starry sky. Animals slept safely, plants grew in well-tended soil, and a true love story continued to be written day after day. It was exactly the peace David had sought when he bought the farm. But it was a peace very different from the loneliness he had imagined. It was the peace that comes from a full life, from fulfilled purpose, from shared love. And somewhere in the stars, Elizabeth smiled, knowing that her last and most important plan had worked. The people she loved most in the world had found each other and built a family that would last for generations. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this moving story about second chances and chosen family. Do you believe that love can truly guide us to the right people? Leave your opinion in the comments with sincere words. Your participation is very important to us. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more touching stories like this one.